talk about this. So the idea came like I was trying to figure out what we should talk about, and then I ran across the street from Alex Segura, who's one of the comic creators that I follow on Twitter. He's great. He's done a lot of really cool things. And I saw he asked a question like off the top of your head, and I don't think I was able to name the things off the top of my head. It took me a second, but it was name your favorite superhero runs, not featuring an A-list character. And then I was like, that's a pretty interesting question. And then I started thinking about it. And then when you said you would have time to talk today, I was like, okay, well we can talk about that. So, and we don't have to stick to four. I don't know how deep you went into this list. Uh, but you wanna kick us off with one of your favorite superhero runs?
Yes, I will. Probably one of my all-time favorite superhero runs is Chris Claremont's run on Uncanny X-Men, specifically when he was working with John Byrne.
Oh, okay.
That to me is probably the peak comics in terms of character development and big gripping stories laced with human drama. It's just really good stuff. And of course, the Dark Phoenix saga is probably my favorite comic book story of all time. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Claremont and
and,
Byrne
and
will
it
work
went
together.
and it ran for so long too. Like I can't even think of a series that goes on that long, like with the same creative team and very little changes and stuff. So yeah, it
Mhm.
was an amazing time to be making comics and be reading them.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know if you've seen that Marvel is doing like this collected edition thing for Claremont's X-Men. It's
I saw
it
it. I
looks like
want it.
yeah. I like the idea. I don't like that they're doing kind of like a Kickstarter type of deal for this. Like if there's enough demand, which I think with the X-Men, like yeah, the demand is gonna be there. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. Seems a little weird that they would need like a minimum order to even think about doing this. All right, well let me go on to one of mine, and I think this is something you'll see on a lot of people's list. The Hawkeye run by Matt Fraction and David Aja.
Hmm.
Um, that was coming out. I got into comics around 2012, and that was coming out. It came out maybe 2 or 3 years after that, and man, it really changed the way I looked at how comics can be done. Have you read the? I'm sure you read this series.
Yes, I do
Okay,
love the Hawkeye run.
yeah, it's amazing. Like it just the I didn't think I ever was like a big fan of Hawkeye, and even now I'm still not like the biggest fan of Hawkeye. But that book really made me kind of care.
It's kind
What's
of a
a
human look at Hawkeye, which is great.
yeah, yeah, for sure. What's the next thing on your list?
My next would probably be Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo on Batman, because that is probably my definitive Batman run. It encompasses a lot of stuff. It introduced the Court of Owls, which are really great villains. It had a genuinely fresh take on the Joker. The Joker is a villain I'd been getting tired of for a while, but Snyder and Capullo utilized him in a fresh new way and kind of really tried to shake up his relationship with Batman. And there
Okay.
was this short-lived arc with Jim Gordon as Batman, which I thought was really cool because Gordon had a giant robot suit, which was really awesome. So yeah,
Yeah, the
Snyder and
Bat Bunny.
Capullo did that, and they also spun off with Dark Knight's Metal and Dark Knight's Death Metal, which is just good comics. So yeah, Capullo on Bat, it's
Oh
Batman.
man, yeah, you are all that stuff is right up my alley. Like I said, I started reading in 2012, which is when that run was. I mean, I think it was maybe starting maybe like a couple issues in, and I was like,
Yeah,
oh, well,
you're right. It's a couple of issues in. Yeah.
let me go chase down those back issues and I'll read them. And I think it's not the first series that I collected all the way through, only because like DC loves to cancel things midway through. So I have a few of those New 52 series. But yeah, that one I would say also it's my definitive Batman. Part of it is definitely because it's the first run I really read all the way through, and like you mentioned, the implications of I don't know how long Snyder planned out his story, um, about going all the way even up to metal and death metal, but it's just fantastic comics, and Greg Capullo just keeps getting better, which is amazing. Like I don't understand how his art just keeps improving.
Capullo is an amazing artist. Like his version of Batman is probably my favorite version of Batman out there, and all the stuff he drew in death metal was just like, how did you do this? Please teach
Yeah,
me your secrets, sir.
yeah, for sure. I was when I finally read Death Metal like at the end of the year because I was waiting for it to almost finish to start to catch up on everything, and I'm just amazed at the number of characters that Capullo and Snyder came up with. Like how many versions of Batman and the Batman from all these multiverses and dark multiverses. Like it's intense. Oh, looks like we got a little audio comment from somebody. So let me play that and then see what that says.
I haven't read Dark Knight's Metal, but I have some of the Funko Pops, and they definitely make me want to get into it.
Oh,
I
thanks,
highly
Matt.
recommend it if you are a Batman fan, if you love DC Comics in general, if you want to see crazy stuff like a Batman flashes powers or a Batwoman who's a mermaid, and DC characters adorned like rock metal stars. Check out Metal and Dark Metal.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're like the extreme of comic book making. Like what happens when you kind of break free of all the continuity and all the like everything that's going on, right? So yeah, it's I don't know where that stuff came from, but it's pretty good. I think on my list of best of 2020, I'm pretty sure that was number one. Like that whole event was my favorite thing last year. Were you covering that series for the website?
I was not. I was just reading as a fan, but
Okay, okay.
I still enjoyed it as a fan, obviously.
Yeah, good,
Yeah.
good. Okay, well, my next thing, it's the Scarlet Spider. It's written by Christopher Yost with a bunch of creators. I don't know if you've read the Scarlet Spider, the one that follows
Kane? Oh
Kane.
yeah,
Yeah,
I loved it. Mainly because Kane was not trying to be a hero; he was just trying to live his life, and crap kept happening. So he kind of had to suit up and
yep.
be a hero. And I really liked that development. A superhero who did not want to be a superhero.
Well, I
That
love the
and Yost had written Wolverine and the X-Men and the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Two cartoons that I wish we could have gotten more of, but were genuinely good
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I really enjoyed that one. I like that they changed the tagline to "All of the power, none of the responsibility." Um, I like the costume change a lot too. And then Kane came down to Houston, which
That
I
made me
always
really happy. Before I moved to Seattle, I grew up in Texas and attended school in Dallas, and my uncle lives in Houston. So for a superhero to make their base of operations in Texas was kind of a really nice touch for me personally. So
yeah, no, same here. I mean, as you know, I live in Texas as well, so like any comic that takes place in Texas, I'm gonna check it out. Um, but yeah, this was cool because I had been reading along with the Superior Spider-Man, and I think this spun out of that, if I remember correctly. It spun out of that because Kane took that one costume from Peter, and I don't remember what the costume used to change colors, but then it just got stuck
it was
for
his
plot
stealth
reasons.
suit.
Yep, yep. So that was cool. I love the redesign. I like that, like you mentioned, stuff just kind of kept happening to Kane to keep him involved. And I was surprised to see him. I saw him. I think the last time we saw Kane was in the New Warriors. I want to say it was the New Warriors a little while ago.
Yes, it was in the New Warriors.
So I'm looking forward to them. I know a lot of people like Ben Reilly better as a clone, but I think Kane's my favorite one of all the clones that are out there of Spider-Man. All right, do you have another series that you want to put on this list?
Another series I would put on this list is Invincible by Robert Kirkman and Corey Walker and later Ryan Otley, because that, I think, is a superhero book for everyone, or at least everyone should read.
Yeah. What you want to tell me a little bit about what Invincible is about? I know the main concept is, and I'm looking forward to the TV show, but I've never actually read it.
Okay, so Invincible, for those who are not familiar, is about a teenager named Mark Grayson, and his father, Nolan, happens to be the world's greatest superhero, Omni-Man. Well, as it turns out, Mark has inherited Nolan's powers of super strength, flight, and near invulnerability, and decides to follow in Dad's footsteps, donning a costume and the appropriate name, Invincible. Now, Invincible is pretty fun because it more or less subverts a good deal of superhero tropes, particularly in its second volume. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't read the comic or the series yet, but you definitely want to read this series because it is packed full of surprises and it's just such a good read.
Now, I guess obviously the show isn't out as of was talking about this, but would you recommend people read the series first and then watch the show, or do you think? I mean, I'm sure they'll. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like adaptations. I like to read the source material after.
I feel like people can definitely watch the show because it definitely feels pulled from the early issues. So, yeah.
Yeah, and there's what, like 25 volumes of Invincible to get through.
Yeah,
right?
it's 144 issues. So yeah, it's a long read, but really worth the investment.
A quick tangent question: Do you have? Is Invincible something you started collecting physically, or is that something you just kind of collected in trades or digital?
I collected it in trades starting back in high school years.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering, especially since you mentioned you moved since you were in college. Like, I would think moving around with a lot of floppies is probably difficult.
Yes.
All right. I'll go to my next series, and I think I definitely avoided, like, this list for me could have been all Batman. So I kind of stayed away from that kind of stuff. But for DC, it was kind of hard for me to find one until I remember that Jeff Lemire wrote Green Arrow, and that he teamed up with Andrea Sorrentino to do that book back in the New 52. I think this was one of the New 52 books that were like really, really cool, really different, and one of the ones where a lot of the books missed the mark. This one sure didn't. So yeah, it feels like a good. I mean, this is really a good comparison to, like, the Hawkeye. Like, what are each of the archers, they get a really good book around the same time, which is pretty funny.
Now that I mention it, that is actually kind of ironic, but also awesome because I dug both Hawkeye and Green Arrow as, being, the down-to-earth archer guy in their respective universes. And the fact that they both had pretty amazing books around the same time is actually really neat.
Yeah, and as Jeff Lemire is known to do, like, he wanted to completely take the superhero that he's working on and just kind of change things up. So Oliver's away from Seattle. He's actually there's a big concept of like different tribes that he belongs to, and it's really weird superhero comics, but it's a lot of fun. And the art, Sorrentino. I mean, there's a reason why Jeff Lemire and Sorrentino have been teaming up for years, and it's because they make a great team. Sorrentino's art, his layouts, the design, and Maiola's colors, they really work together. I know after that they went on to work on the Old Man Logan series,
Yes.
and then I think currently they just finished Gideon Falls for Image Comics, which once again Sorrentino's art and his work just keeps evolving into this weird, especially for that last book. Like it's supposed to be a horror, so Sorrentino really knows how to bring that out in a book. All right, CJ, what's next on your list?
Next on my list is Hellboy by Mike Mignola. Another long, lengthy run, but definitely worth it. I would at least recommend the first volume, The Seed of Destruction, because that inspired the first Guillermo del Toro movie and is actually a pretty solid run that sets up a lot of what Hellboy is all about. But yeah, that's Hellboy. The Hellboy universe is really fun, and it mixes like so many different influences into one gigantic comic book stew, and it works.
I haven't read much Hellboy. I think I've only read like the first 3 or 4 volumes. Um, I think I don't know if it's my favorite, but the one that stands out the most, and it's probably because that's the one that the latest movie kind of took inspiration from, was the third one. I think it's called The Chained Coffin.
Yes.
And I mean, when I was reading that, I read that after watching I don't what is it, 2016 movie, with David Harbour.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you've seen that one. I'm sure as a
I
Hellboy fan,
have.
you probably, yeah. And you can tell me what you thought about it in a minute. But as I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is almost like a straight up adaptation of a lot of the stuff. Like they really wanted to get all the Hellboy they could in the movie. So yeah, it was very cool. It had Mignola's art is something that I love. So like anytime I can get some piece of art with like any cover or something, because he's done a lot of like a lot of covers for Del Toro for like some of his Criterion movies and stuff like that. I tend to pick that stuff up. But how did you? What was your experience with the latest Hellboy movie?
I would stick to reading the comics. I was not a fan of it.
Yeah, I really think they tried to put too much into the movie, and yeah, it got a little bit lost. Uh, it has a lot of cool visuals, but yeah, I think that's about it. And it comes in a really cool steelbook because Mignola drew the art for that. So that's the only reason I own that movie. All right, well, let me go on to, I guess this is kind of the last one. And as I was putting this together, my favorite hero is in Marvel is SpiderMan.
Mm-hmm.
And so the run that I picked, because I wanted to kind of stay away from from the main guys. So I picked Venom by Rick Remender, also from around that 2014 era of comics, when Marvel was taking different creators and just putting them in the books, and really letting them do their thing.
Oh
But
yeah, Remender's Venom is amazing.
yeah, I love that big cover by Joe Quesada, but I wasn't caught up on all the continuity, so I didn't know why Venom was a different person until this run. Like it really does a good job of explaining what Flash Thompson's been through and how he got to get this symbiote and why he's moving around. I think in this one he moves to Philly at some point.
He does move to Philly, and becomes a high school gym teacher.
Yeah, And I also love the design of Agent Venom. You know, I think that looks super cool.
Oh, it's
So
awesome. It has the whole tactical look, and
yeah,
yeah.
and then this is one of my favorite crossovers. I normally don't like when two series intercept that I'm not reading, but luckily for me, when this had a crossover with the Thunderbolts that I think Charles Soule was writing at the time, which I also picked up, like they go to hell,
Hmm.
and Venom's one of the Thunderbolts, and then out of that we get one of my, I guess one of my favorite characters that has come out in the last few years, which is Andy Parks. I think it's no, I don't remember her name, but her name is Andy, but she becomes Mania because she has a piece of the Venom suit,
Yes.
uh, which I'm glad they brought Andy back. I think she's currently Scream, so she's wearing another symbiote with all this King in Black stuff. I don't know if you're keeping up with that.
I am, and yes, and yeah, she has become Scream, and that is. I was just like, at first, I was like, I didn't know how I felt about that, but now I'm actually like, huh, this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad that she's not gone. All right, do you have anything else on your list?
I too am a huge Spider-Man fan, and my personal favorite is J. Michael Straczynski's Spider-Man run. That was my first exposure to Spidey in comics, and it's just so good. It gets to the core of what Peter Parker is all about, and it also features some pretty cool villains like Merlin and who else? Shathra, and yeah, it's definitely a great read for newcomers to Spider-Man and longtime Spider-Man fans. So, yes, as my first ever Spider-Man comic, that was pretty. That was a pretty good read. So yeah, that is probably one of my all-time favorite comic book runs.
If I remember correctly, that run ends kind of like with a lot of big stuff happening to Peter, right? We have, I think, Civil War has a lot
Yeah,
of big implications for Peter.
yeah,
Uh,
he unmasks and
and then we have the Back in Black arc because of the
yep,
consequences from Civil War. And then we have probably maybe the most infamous Spider-Man story, the One More Day
yeah,
story, which I, as somebody that hadn't really been reading Spider-Man for the last 30 years, I thought it was very interesting that was happening. Um, I can understand why big, longtime fans of like Peter and Mary Jane, and they would probably not think that's their favorite story.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, how did you feel when you read One More Day?
I was like, wait, are they for real? Because I was just like, wait, is Spider-Man really trading his marriage to the
Yeah,
devil? I'm just like, well, yeah, wasn't a fan, was not a fan.
okay. So, but I mean, I'm glad to hear that the rest of Straczynski's run is very good. So I'll have to
Yes,
go back
that
and check
is
that
one more
out.
day aside. The rest is I'd recommend reading.
Great. All right. Next on my list, I have, and this didn't make it onto my tweet. If anybody saw my tweet last night, because we can only pick 4 pictures, but um, the Wolverine and the X-Men that Jason Aaron started after, I think, after Schism, when he went on to find Wolverine
Yeah, the
became
Jean
the
Grey
headmaster of
school.
the school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that run because I love all the students so much. Like all those characters that are students, I found that to be some of the best X-Men stuff that I've ever read. And right now the bar's pretty high for the X-Men with all the stuff that Hickman and the teams are doing. But if I like that, I feel like that run is really underrated for an X-Men run.
I totally agree with you because Aaron had written Wolverine before, but he not with the Wolverine the X Men. He was taking it in a different direction, and
Yep.
the Jean Grey school was amazing. Like I know like Hickman placed all the X Men on Krakoa, but it turned out that the Jean Grey School literally was founded on Krakoa, which I
Yeah,
also find amazing. And it had some of my favorite X-Men school teachers, you know, Iceman, Beast, Kitty Pryde,
yeah,
Storm later
yeah.
joined
No,
on, and Rachel Gray. So yeah, they had some of my favorite X-Men too. So it was just a really fun book.
I really like the even some of the characters that they brought in, like Kid Gladiator. Oh, he was really fun to read.
Kid Gladiator
And
was
then
so funny,
yeah,
and so was Warbird.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I love every time those characters come back. But I think my favorite was Brood, because Brood, I feel like he's like just best boy ever. You know, like his arc of being a mutant from the Brood colony because he's not like a killing machine like everyone else. I was like, that's so like, how do you even come up with something like that? So
Yeah,
yeah,
you
I
are
love
really
Brood
good. Yeah, I think the best writers usually take what you think of somebody and flip it around. In this case, you know, we have we have Brew, who's a brood, who are usually a bloodthirsty race that infect others, but here he's just a kid who happens to be really, really smart, which I like.
for sure. All right, well that's all I have on my list. Do you have anything else that you want to touch on real quick before we start wrapping up?
I think if I had one more run that I really liked, it would probably be. Oh yeah, I liked Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason's run on Superman during the DC Rebirth era because Clark Kent as a father is probably the most intriguing story I've seen with Superman, and and how he raised his son John, and how he and Lois were still dealing with moving to another place and living as farms was really good. And yeah, it was just a really new take on Superman that I enjoyed, and it kind of
Yep.
made him more, it gave him a mention as a character. So that is probably one of my favorite Superman runs, the Rebirth run.
Great. Yeah, that's a great run. And then, because of that, we got the Super Son series, which I also love.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that too.
I think John and I'm glad they did the follow up series, even though like like in the when Mendes took over, they aged up John. I'm glad that Tomasi still got a little bit like he got some more stories out of it, even if they were just kind of like lost to time with that Adventures of the Super Son series. But yeah, Damon and John, they're so different that they make a great team. Um, I mean, just like Batman and Superman, they really complement each other well. Um, cool. Uh, do you have any recommendations from the stuff that you read this week? I know you wrote a few reviews.
I would. It's not out for 2 weeks, but I would recommend everybody pick up Radiant Black issue 1 from Image Comics when it comes out on February 10th. It is written by Kyle Higgins, who wrote Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, The Rise of Ultraman, Winter Soldier, and Batman Beyond 2.0. It is illustrated and colored by Marcelo Costa, and it focuses on Nathan Bennett, a down on his luck writer who happens to gain powers from a black hole. And I definitely recommend it if you are a fan of indie books, if you're a fan of superhero comics, if you love Power Rangers or Ultraman, or if you are an aspiring writer. I think there's something here for everyone, and I would definitely recommend that everybody pick that up when it comes out. And yeah, that's a book on my personal list that I would recommend to folks. How about you, Danny?
That's awesome. Uh, well, I definitely added that to my pool. I think maybe 2 weeks ago, whenever it was available in previews, because it took a minute for it to get there. But yeah, I got that added. I think one of the better things I read this week. Let me check my list of everything that I picked up. because it was a few things, but I didn't get to read everything. Oh, you know what was really fun? The
What?
Future State Suicide Squad #1. Um, they took a bunch of. I mean, the cover looks like it's all the Justice League heroes. This book is written by Robbie Thompson and Fernando. I think Javier Fernandez is on art because there's two stories, but the first story is about the Suicide Squad. But these are actually like fake Justice League members that are actually Task Force X. That Amanda Waller is making it seem like they're the Justice League in this new universe of the future state that that's going on. So I really enjoyed it. I really liked the Suicide Squad. I need to go back and finish Tom Taylor's run, but this was a fun thing to kind of jump into to figure out how all these people, because if you're reading Justice League, you know that all these heroes are not really there. So how did Amanda Waller get a hold of them? So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Okay, well, I think we can wrap up. But CJ, where can people find you, and where can they go read your reviews and stuff for comics?
I am on Twitter at CJ Writes Things, on Instagram at CJ Writes Stuff, and my written work is on butwhythoughpodcast.com and comic book resources. So you can find my written work there.
Okay, great. You can find me at Echo Spider on Twitter, and make sure to follow at Next Issue Podcast on Twitter as well. We'll be putting out a new episode probably in the next few weeks, where we just kind of talk about comics. We're trying to do a Q&A episode, so if you have any questions, tweet at us and we'll put them on there. But CJ, thanks for jumping on and trying this out. I'm really enjoying this app where I get to just talk about comics for random spurs of time. So
No
this was a
problem,
lot of
man.
fun.
Thank you for having me. It was fun to talk about some of my favorite comics. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Great, man. Thank you. Well, take care, everyone. Bye.
Have a good week, everybody.